Oh, hey, I'm glad you're here. This episode was recorded between the passing of two greats. The first being writer and director Stuart Gordon. I'm a big fan of Stuart's work, Reanimator, From Beyond, The Dolls, all classic. My guest, though, personally knew Stuart, worked with him, so we discussed all of that kind of off mic. The second being Brian Dennehy, who's in this week's film. First Blood, Cocoon, Silverado, we'll cover that. Pretty much every performance he ever gave, I think, is fantastic, both dramatic or comedic. He was excellent on TV as well, and would even pop up uncredited in films like Tag, for instance. I was particularly sad about his passing, and I'm thankful that we have so many of his great performances to revisit. Even though you don't really know somebody, their passing can still affect you. Speaking of effects, that brings us to this episode. Growing up in my dad's mom and pop video store, I've said before that I had access to everything and I would watch it all. And sometimes, three-fourths the way into something that wasn't astounding per se, there would be a special effect and it would blow your mind. And you'd rewatch that film just to see those scenes again. Scanners is a bad example because I love scanners, but anyone who saw it, if you said scanners to them, they would probably mention heads exploding. And the smartest move for people designing the boxes for video stores was to have an amazing cover, obviously, and then on the back, you'd put stills of either the stunts or special effects, something to grab people's attention. So, Basket Case had a split open face. Ghoulies had, well, Ghoulies. The Incredible Melting Man had, well, you see where this is going. So, makeup effects, some of them would also haunt you. It didn't have to be just, a giant robot or something. Julia coming out of the mattress in Hellraiser 2 is unbelievably terrifying. Another favorite of mine is Henrietta in Evil Dead 2. Someone's in my fruit cellar became a mantra amongst my friends back in the day. But we'll talk more about her later. I didn't create this podcast to speak with famous people or people in the industry, but when this opportunity arrived, I just couldn't pass it up. I had to ask this person because I genuinely respect them and their work, and appreciate what they've created that's stuck in my brain for all these years. Thankfully, they agreed, and I'm so excited that you get to hear this right now. So, here we go. The film is FX. The guest is a special makeup effects artist, and this is VH Us. Hello, and welcome to VH Us, a podcast where each episode's about a film, and the guest has the profession portrayed in the film. I'm joined today by Mark Shostrom, who's a special makeup effects artist. Thank you for being here.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
People can find more about you on your website. I'm going to spell it markshostrom.com, Mark Shostrom, and markshostrom.weebly.com, which is a blog which has you post photos, there's stories. I love it.
The blog is better than the website, actually. I do more writing and personal photos there.
Yeah, and I'm just going to mention quickly a couple of credits for you that are ones that I'm not going to mention later on, so that people know. There's Dick Tracy, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Men in Black, the Buffy the Vampire series, all things that you have worked on.
And every horror icon film from the 80s. No,
yeah, we'll touch on those. But the reason I'm joined by Mark Shostrom today is because we're brought together by the film FX. Normally, I ask if this was a first-time watch, but I have a feeling you've seen it before.
Of course, all of us who do makeup effects back in 1986 or whenever, 86 or 87, whenever it came out, we all went to it. And, there's a lot of elbow bumping and chuckling during certain spots when Raleigh Tyler / Brian Brown was not doing it quite the way it's really done.
Yeah. That's kind of the fun thing. A lot of times, I mean, you've seen the film, but other people who say like a midwife or something, maybe they haven't watched some of these movies, especially the horror ones, and then they're watching it just like confused at like what's happening with their profession on screen. But that's, I guess that's the magic of the film.
I'd been in the business in the profession for about 6 or 7 years by that point, and doing makeup since I was a kid. And a bunch of us makeup effects people, we went to see FX, and it's not really true to life. Like
Right.
He drives around this big van that says FX.
Yes.
And the thing about special effects is viewers are really savvy, especially today. But the norm is that people put special effects into one category, like a
Yes.
spaceship flying is a special effect, and it is. And a guy's face melting off is a special effect, and it is, but they're different parts of the field. They're actually specific fields themselves. Like when you say special effects, in the film business, that means the guy who comes in and does explosions or makes a room rotate. There are big mechanical rigs and things like that. Then you get into optical effects, what used to be optical effects, which is now computer generated effects or CGI, where it's, the impossible things you can't really go out and film, like, planets exploding or,
Sure.
Wonder Woman flying through the air. And there's all different types of special effects, and there's special makeup effects, and that has to do with anything involving an actor. And usually a special makeup itself can be like The Grinch or something in Dick Tracy. A special makeup effect is where there's something related to makeup on the actors, where something happens, like a throat is cut, a bullet is shot through a guy's head, his hand is blown off, he transforms into a werewolf. That's a special makeup effect.
Got it.
So the effect is actually something that happens. And
it's like something that's in process.
It's something that happens, like something has to change.
Got it.
Like the guy, Sterling Hayden in The Godfather, is the cop sitting at the table. He gets a bullet hole through his forehead. That's a special makeup, but there's an effect that happens in the makeup. So it applies it to both. So if you want to get really, everybody in the film business knows the differences.
Sure.
But your general viewer they lump special effects into one big category. So when people introduce me, sometimes they, oh, this is Mark, he does special effects. I go, no, I don't. I do special makeup, because I don't do rotating rooms and, things like that. And special effects is the guy that comes in and blows up the car and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't do pyrotechnics and all that. So there you go. So Raleigh Tyler in the movie, he does it all.
Yes.
It's and right in the beginning, it's just he's got the fiberglass shell on Diane Verona as the actress in the first scene of the film.
Mm-hmm.
He pulls it off, and he's got the wires and all that. Well, the special effects guy would do that. He would do the plate and the wires and the explosions for the blood bags. But the makeup person would usually supply the blood, and if there's a prosthetic on the actor's skin,
yes,
that would be the makeup part of it. So right in the beginning, the first scene of the film is like all of us guys in the audience that are doing makeup effects, we're kind of looking at each other, rolling our eyes.
It would be a team of people.
Yeah, and there's an overlap. But of course, I like the movie. Hey, I watched it a couple times. I watched it the other night, and I do enjoy it for what it is. It's got a really great production value. It's a really good cast, good performances, and all that. And it's kind of cool. It's shot in New York City, and you gotta love that. And boy, I wish I had a really cool song at the end. When I drive off in my white Rover or whatever.
Yeah, something by a band called Imagination.
Yeah,
actually gets a title card, which is insane to me.
Yeah,
the credit sequence. Huey Lewis is mentioned just before they mentioned where they rented cars from.
It's funny. A tiny sliver of my work is actually in that film, which is there's a car crash in the rain. A car crashes into a wall.
Yeah.
And I get to a wide shot, and there's dozens of posters of Chuck Norris and Code of Silence on these posters on the wall. And I did Chuck's makeup for that film poster.
Wow.
There's my work.
That's awesome. The synopsis of the film is a movie special effects man is hired to fake a real-life mob killing for a witness protection plan, but finds out his own life is in danger. I guess that's what it boils down to. At the time of this recording, FX Murder by Illusions, which is the full title, is available on DVD, Blu-ray, and streaming on Amazon. Putting the film in context, the director Robert Mandel, he did television, did FX, Touch and Go, Big Shots, School Ties, and The Substitute. So he put in some work there. The cinematographer is Miroslav Andrasek. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
I think so.
Okay. Did Dark Sun, Ragtime, Amadeus, FX, A League of Their Own, The Preacher's Wife, and Riding in Cars with Boys. So that's probably why I think this film looks great.
Yeah, I mean, you got the guy that did Amadeus a couple of years before, and I wonder it looks so good.
Yeah. I mean, just the opening scene where it feels like really film noir.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm all in on this. Even though we then find out we're in a movie within a movie. But the editor, Terry Rawlings, did GoldenEye, Alien 1 and 3, Legend,
Wow.
Yentl. Worked on Blade Runner, Chariots of Fire, and then 1977's The Sentinel, which is a movie I really like.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
Actors, we got Brian Brown, who was in Cocktail 2 years later. He was in Gorillas in the Mist, and he's still going strong. I kept these kind of short because we have a lot to talk about. Then we have Brian Dennehy, of course, First Blood, Cocoon, Silverado. He's still acting to this day, even though
Bestseller, isn't
he's
he?
looked. Yeah, oh, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's looked the same age since he started, which is pretty amazing. Uh, then we have Diane Venora. Am I saying that
I
right?
think it's
Diane Venora.
Venora Verona. I'd have to see it written down. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
me
been
too.
a New York actress.
I think I wrote it wrong, but she was in Heat, The Jackal, Romeo and Juliet, Ironweed, tons of TV, and she's still going. So it's a rarity that you see.
Wolfen, you forgot
All,
Wolfen.
oh, right, Wolfen, of course.
Yeah, you
Um,
can't get these past me, buddy.
right. Thank you for keeping me on my toes. For special effects, we got Connie Brink, but also is mentioned as Connor Brink. But they worked on Wolfen, Amityville 3D, Turk 182, Manhattan Project, The Believers, Ghostbusters 2, She Devil with Roseanne Barr. That's a movie. Um, his team also features Al Griswold. I don't know if you know this person. Worked on Leon the Professional, Die Hard with a Vengeance. And then for the consultant, which I was going to ask you what this means, we have John Steers, who did Star Wars,
Oh
Thunderball, and
yeah, those are
Outland,
great.
which is incredibly underrated. Um, what does it mean when you're an FX consultant?
It can mean they really can afford to hire you to do the work, and they would
Okay.
pay you a fee to say, well, we've got this other guy. Could you just kind of oversee or whatever? Also, if you're retired, they might bring you in, but I don't think John Steers is retired by then.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to get to them, but there's two names you haven't mentioned. The first big credit in the end of the movie is special makeup effects supervisor Carl Fullerton. And Carl,
I don't have
uh,
Carl on here.
oh, you do?
No, I don't. I missed Carl
Oh,
somehow.
well, you watch the end of the movie where they're driving off and that cool song is playing. The
Yes.
first crew credit after the actors is a big single card of Carl Fullerton. And Carl had apprenticed with Dick Smith, the legendary
Whoa.
makeup godfather, and Carl had worked by that time on things like Altered States for a year with Dick Smith, Ghost
Yeah.
Story,
Love
The
it.
Hunger. Carl is a great makeup artist, a super nice guy, and he was in charge of all the prosthetic effects involving mostly involving Jerry Orbach. Anything where Brian Brown looks different or has to do an actual makeup prosthetic and the making of the molds and bringing the mafia guy in to get him ready for his little adventure there. So Carl was in charge of all the makeup effects, special effects in the movie. A friend of mine actually worked on it. A guy I went into business with, Brian Tausick, and he's credited as making Rosebud, Nellie, and the other lifelike replicas. And Brian pretty much single-handedly made all he made the Rosebud, the big creature that kind of
Yes.
lurches at you when you open the door of Brian Brown's loft. And Brian did all the props and the bodies and the heads within Brian's Raleigh Tyler's
Yeah,
lab
all the
there.
fake movie props in the film.
Yeah, all the ones from I Dismember Mama and things like that. And
Yes.
in fact, Brian told me that Nellie, the woman in the nightgown with the screaming head, the one that
Yeah.
they throw out of the car, Nellie's head was actually a man's head, and Bryant used that deliberately to give it a kind of a different look. It's kind of looks like an old lady, but it's
Yeah.
actually a middle-aged man's head with a female wig on it. So a little bit of trivia there.
I love that.
But no, between Carl Fullerton and Bryant Tausick, they created pretty much all the makeup-related effects and props and things like that in the film. They did a wonderful job.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And as you touched on before, there's many different positions per project, and different things. Like you said, that there's makeup and people that work in the mechanics and things like that. I've heard terminology, and I was curious, what does it mean if someone's a lead or a key?
Lead or key, it's more or less a union term. Like
Got it.
if you're a makeup supervisor or a costume supervisor, the top you're the top person in that category on that film. If you're the key, it's usually the word key, not lead so much anymore. That means you're the main person in charge of the day to day on the set. Then you have assistant, and then you have in England you have I think it's not called apprentice, trainee, something like that. So it just, you kind of look at the words and you can, and also the position of the person's name and the size of it. Sometimes you can kind of figure out who is in charge. That's usually how it goes.
And using Phantasm 2 as an example, which is a film that you worked on, uh, if the tall man's sphere is flying through the mausoleum, is that your work?
No, that
That's
was
not your
a special effect.
right. But the
In
sphere
fact,
burrowing through the priest, is that your work?
the whole thing there, Phantasm 2 is a good example of overlap. My
Yeah,
friend Steve, my friend Steve Patino did all these sphere effects and everything related.
yeah.
So, for example, when you got the priest is in the hall and you hear the sphere coming,
Oh
when you
yeah.
cut to the shot of the sphere flying through the air and the drill coming out and swirling around, all that is Steve Patino's work. When it came
Wow.
to the point where the sphere goes by Ken Tygar, who played the priest, cuts his ear off,
Yeah.
that was both Steve and myself and Robert Kurtzman who was assisting me. And we did
Oh,
a prosthetic on Ken Tygar where his ears cut off. But for shooting the actual shot, it was me, Rob Kurtzman, and Steve Patino, three special effects guys in different fields, all contributing to that one effect to make it work. So there's a lot of overlap. That was a perfect example of
great.
different types of special effects. You had a special mechanical effect or a special sphere effect and special makeup effects for one shot. And when it burrows through his body, the one you were mentioning, it
Mhm.
was the same thing. Steve Patino came in and created all the sphere things with the rotating teeth or whatever,
Yeah.
and my crew created the body and the blood and all that.
It's one of my favorite sequences. And the Phantasm movies, they just, for some reason, I mean, growing up in a video store, I just gravitated towards, for some reason, Phantasm 2, and then kind of worked backwards because I was pretty young. Um, and when the fifth one ended, I cried. I had like an emotional response to like the end of Reggie and the Tall Man. These
Oh, I'm
two,
sorry. Well, they're still alive. Well, Angus is not, but most of everybody else is really still alive.
yeah, but I think it was also because Angus had passed, and I just knew that these people had gone on this journey together through these 5 films over so many years. Uh, I don't know. It was awesome. So I just really love that you got to participate in those in
Well,
movies.
I got to do 2 and 3, and
Yeah,
yeah, it was different and interesting. And by the time we got onto the set of Phantasm 3, it's like, oh, here's Reggie again. Hey, how's it going? What have you been doing the last 5 years? And
yeah,
like a little family of people, really nice
I love
people.
that. I also read that From Beyond had 4 special effects teams. Is that true? And how do you navigate 4 separate teams on a film?
Well, when I went in and talked to Stuart Gordon and producer Brian Usna about it, the script was just absolutely full of effects, and
Yes, that movie is.
yeah, they knew they had to hire a few teams, and it was kind of a matter of. I think Stuart chose me to do Pretorius creature, and for his we call it the Mister Bubble, where he's all bubbly and his nose comes out. So Stuart kind of wanted me to do those, and they chose John Bickler to do like the shrimp creature,
Hmm.
and a guy named John Nolan came in to do the bald head effects on Jeffrey Combs with the pineal gland coming out, and the last person was Tony Dublin. So anyway, there's 4 teams. Myself, John Nolan, and John Beekler were makeup artists. Tony Dublin was a mechanical artist,
Got it.
mechanical effects artist. So he did all the rigging for all the big rigs that had to like physically pick up the creatures and make them move and things like that.
Hmm.
And then there was the resonator. I don't remember. I think Tony Dublin was in charge of the resonator machine. I don't recall exactly, but it was a matter of coordinating all to bring in somebody to oversee that so that things wouldn't be forgotten or mistakes made. They brought in a guy named Michael Muscal as special effects supervisor. So Tony, the 2 Johns, and myself all had separate workshops in LA, and Michael Muscal would make his a couple times a week he'd pop around to each of our shops, see what we're doing, check the script, check the schedule, check the list of effects, make sure everybody's on track. Okay, so and so's doing the shrimp thing that goes with your thing that you're making. Okay, let me drive to John's shop and make sure he's got what he needs. And for example, John Beekler had to make a little tiny version of the Mr. Bubble for
Hmm.
something to rip out, and he sent one of his sculptors over my shop, and the sculptor Mitch Devane sat in my shop and sculpted his miniature version while Bob Kurtzman was sculpting the big version, so they matched. So that was the type of coordination and overlap we had there with the different teams. And, that was a really ambitious film for special makeup effects, special effects,
Oh
and
yeah.
everything. When I went in and saw, barged into Stewart's office and saw the drawings they were doing, as we got into more detailed meetings of what we're going to do and how we're going to break it down, it was very clear right from the beginning that these amazing drawings they had some guy do were just too expensive. It was like
Oh yeah.
beyond altered states quality,
Mhm.
uh, really ambitious effects like big arms of slime shooting across a 100-foot ceiling and coming back
Right.
down. Stuff you
It's
could do in optical effects and not leave your desk from your computer today.
yeah,
Back then, they had to be physically created, most of them.
and I love it.
Yeah. But, the good old rubber days.
Yeah. We start with a triumphant title card before setting into some wonderful Bill Conti music. Bill Conti's known for doing all of the Rocky films, for Your Eyes Only, Karate Kid 1, 2, and 3, and he's the conductor for the Academy Awards from like 1982 till now, basically.
Yeah, his legend.
Yeah, it's incredible. The music is wonderful. In this film, I think it has a great energy to it. You're also a musician, and interesting enough, did makeup effects for a Nine Inch Nails March of the Pigs video?
Yep. And a
Did they?
Ramones video.
Oh yeah. Did Nine Inch Nails approach you? How did that come about? Did Trent know your
No,
work?
around 1994, I guess, my friend Phil Duffin, who used to be my roommate, I was an art director for Evil Dead and 2 and Phantasm 2. He called me and said he was doing a lot of commercials, high-end Bruce
Mhm.
Springsteen, Van Halen. And he called me and said, "Hey, I'm doing this music video for Nine Inch Nails." And I said, "Who?" Because I didn't know who they were at the time. And he told me what was involved, which is basically these huge wounds that have to open up and undulate and squirt, gallons of pus on the band. And I said, "Hey, I'm all in for that." So that came about through Phil, my friend who was in charge of all the set design and things like that. So he knew how to build the sets. These big. What came out in the censored version was this big kind of red clay wall.
Mhm.
This big cave with red clay walls, and the band is standing in water. You can find the censored version on YouTube. It takes a little looking for it. But the original version had that. And Phil did all the set design and construction for all the sets and the walls and everything. But he needed my expertise to make the wounds and
Mhm.
basically big prosthetics we glued to the wall and a way to make them move, which was, basically pushing them with our hands. And, we devised ways to pour 5-gallon loads of methyl cellulose yellow pus that spray out the walls onto the band while they're playing. It was absolutely insane.
That's amazing. We get a mysterious figure in the film enters a restaurant, brandishes a machine gun, and opens fire. There's exploding fish tanks everywhere. My favorite is that right when he walks in, a guy stands up like he's going to the restroom, and he gets shot and then set on fire and then disappears running into the bathroom still. It's pretty wild. A woman pleads for her life. Before she's shot, there's more lobster tanks exploding. It's pretty great opening, and then we see that there's a crew, and it's a movie within a movie.
What a surprise.
Yeah. Brian strolling around talking to the actors. We don't really know how Brian got his start. It's not addressed in the movie as Tyler, but we also don't really know how you got your start. But I have heard that a portion of your story involves Evelyn Karloft.
Yeah, a long time. Sort of yes and no. How old was I? I was living in Hong Kong. I was 13 years old, and I was a big Boris Karloff fan for many years since I was
Yeah.
like 7. And I've told the story so many times, but for those who haven't heard it, we were living in a big apartment block in a place called Repulse Bay in Hong Kong. And I read in the paper one day that Mrs. Karloff was in town visiting friends, and Boris had died a year before.
Mm.
She was visiting friends, and in the newspaper it said she's staying at the Repulse Bay Hotel, which was next door to us. And I could stand on my 13th floor balcony and literally look down into the veranda of the Repulse Bay Hotel. It was that I could throw a rock. It was that close.
Wow.
So long story short, I'm 13. I asked my dad and mom, how can I get to meet her? And they suggested, write her a note and we'll drop some flowers for her at the desk. And that worked. And she called me that night and I had tea with her
Oh,
a
that's
couple of
so cool.
times. And, I mean, she's the recent widow of probably the most famous horror icon actor ever.
Yeah.
And she was the first person I showed my early makeup photos to. They weren't even a portfolio. They were just loose photos of makeups I'd done on myself the summer before. And, sweet lady, very encouraging. We ended up writing letters for, God, 23, 25 years after that. She ended up becoming friends with my brother, and we all wrote letters for many decades after that. So
That's
she wasn't
incredible.
really the person that helped me into the movie business, but she was the first person to give me critique and encouragement, and she did. It was wonderful. That was, God, 50 years ago. Wow.
Wow. That's amazing. In the film, Diane says nobody cares for movies about people anymore. They just care about special effects, which is interesting. Because I feel like it's now like digital spectacle is what it feels like. It's just universes exploding. People go to the theaters to see something impossible like that.
I don't know. I guess you got different groups of moviegoers. I kind of, I get the mentality of the blockbuster and the spectacle, and that's what brings people in and makes movie studios lots of money.
Mm-hmm.
They're not my type of films that I go see. I like movies about people, actually.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Frank, can I borrow this?
Brian borrows a man's cigarette and puts it out on his wrist. So this is where I inquire about terminology. Is this effect a makeup effect? And what is a gag? I keep hearing people say gag.
A gag is, how do I know? Nobody's ever asked me that question.
Oh,
A gag is the effect. What has to
okay.
happen? What's the gag? Oh, the gag is Brian puts his cigarette out on his own wrist.
Oh, okay.
The effect is he does the same thing. It's just another word for effect. It's just movie terminology. But no, to answer your question, that what he does in that scene is a makeup effect, but
Okay.
it's combined with a prop, probably. And I did the exact same effect for Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and Penelope Sudo is watching Freddy on TV in the hospital, and she puts a cigarette out on the back of her hand. Exact same thing. So basically, it was a protective metal plate. I did it, which is probably similar to how Carl did it. I did a little protective metal plate and covered it prosthetic on the back of her hand to look like her real back of the hand, that she could put a cigarette out into it without burning herself. And
Got it.
then you had to replace the prosthetic to redo the gag or the effect. And I don't remember if we used a real cigarette. I think we used a combination of a real cigarette, a fake cigarette with a glowing ember, and smoke come through it, and that would be the purview of the special effects or prop department. In this case, probably props. So you got a prop cigarette that looks like it's real, like it's burning and smoking, but it's safe because it's not hot. Any combination of those things. And in FX, Brian Brown puts the cigarette on his wrist, I believe, and then he peels off the prosthetic, if I'm correct. And that's what he's trying to convey in the movie, is that, oh, here's a fake piece of protective skin so I could put a real cigarette out. That's what they want you to believe.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm first made sure of my will and pleasure. I have an audition in half an hour.
Next, Ellen is talking in a fake British accent and doing some incredible vocal exercises. And we see Brian in Tidy Whities, which I Blame Risky Business, which came out 3 years earlier.
Yeah, what a surprise, huh?
And then just a few years
later. That's how
later.
all of us makeup effects guys walked around in those days in our whitey tidies.
And just
we all went to meetings that way, and we're all shirtless all the time, like Brian Brown.
Yes, he started the trend, I guess, right?
Exactly.
Then the producer enters the situation, and a crazy Yeti alien named Rosebud greets him.
Hey.
Rosebud, created by Bryant Taussig out of cut Scott foam. I believe Bryant told me that he was created all the effects under the direction of John Steers, the special effects guy. And I just remember this just now.
Okay.
And he said John told him to make, make the props like Nellie and all that look very realistic, but make Rosebud look kind of comical and goofy and, scary, like a kid's alien type thing. So that's why Rosebud kind of looks that way. It doesn't look like a realistic,
Right.
menacing creature. It looks kind of something that could almost be in a kid's show. And
Oh, for sure.
that's what John steers his direction to Bryant, as I recall.
I love it. On the back, we see a zombie poster and Fade to Black, which is a movie that's been stuck on VHS for a long time. They're
Okay.
both real, but all the movie effects and props are from made-up films for the movie. But there's a baby that the producer calls Rockadie Baby, and I'm
Yeah,
pretty
which
sure it's
is
from.
Rick Baker's It's Alive, Baby. Yeah.
Yes, I saw it and I was like, this movie's doing some weird like Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood type of stuff. Where
Yeah, I'd forgotten about the It's Alive picture until I saw it again the other night. I went, what the hell? They also reference when he and Andy are in the truck talking about, hey, remember when we did this film? Yeah, we'll do this. He mentions a film called Hellraisers with an S. I thought that was rather interesting because I
yeah,
don't know, I don't think Hellraiser had come out quite by then. So that was
what's that?
interesting.
80? Yeah, I
Well,
don't know.
check the release dates for FX and Hellraiser.
Yes, we've got some
Clever.
cross.
Um, I think Hellraiser came out after, if I'm not mistaken. But it was interesting. It's kind of funny that he and Andy are driving along and they're crazy. It looks like a fucking bread truck or something
Yes.
to deliver bread in the 1950s. Like nobody drives a van like that. And they're driving along, and being chased. Hey, Andy, remember when we did I Just Remember Mama? And the
Yeah.
truck is shaking. Yeah, well, give him Nellie or whatever. That is just, I'm just rolling my eyes going, oh, what the hell?
Yeah, they have
It,
all the
it
props
does,
still.
yeah, it does not happen like that. The funny thing is, the whole premise of the movie, having the Justice Department hire Raleigh Tyler to disguise the guy and make a fake assassination.
Yeah.
I mean, similar things to that have happened with makeup effects people
Whoa.
in the past. I know that. Are you familiar with the raid on Entebbe in Uganda in the 70s?
No.
Where it's the dictator Idi Amin had. I don't remember the details exactly, but there were a bunch of British nationals who were being held hostage in a terrorist situation, essentially by the dictator Idi Amin. I think they were near the airport. I don't remember all the details, but there were British citizens and Israeli citizens were being held. I don't remember how many. I'd have to read. If you Google the raid on Entebbe, Entebbe, you'll read about it. It's a fascinating period in history. And essentially, um, the Israeli Secret Service, Mossad, is that the correct name? They're badass guys for protecting their citizens, and they said we're going to go in and we're going to rescue our citizens and all those innocent people. And one thing they did was they had a professional makeup effects artist in Israel create Idi Amin disguise makeups on several people. Idi Amin is very distinctive looking, huge African guy, just a huge, very bulky. I mean, he's like 6'5" and must be 300 pounds. He's a massive man with his big cheeks, very unmistakable look and presence. And the makeup artist from Israel created a bunch of duplicate makeups on people to look like Idi Amin. So during the raid, when Idi Amin's soldiers are trying to come in and stop the raid, they're looking for their boss and they don't know who's who or where he is. Oh, he's here. He's safe. So they used makeup effects as a distraction method in this whole intelligence rescue operation, which I thought was really, really forward thinking, especially at the time, to use a disguise makeup situation like that. So it has been done before. I don't know specifically. There's the whole film Argo is about enlisting makeup artist
Oh,
John
yeah.
Chambers to help with the Tehran hostages. My dad was almost one of them. He was at the Tehran embassy about 6 hours before that happened, so
Oh,
he
jeez.
got out just in time. But ironically, as another weird coincidence, John Chambers was the only person I knew when I moved to Hollywood in October '79, and I got to meet him around January 1980 when all of that stuff in Argo was going on. So the times I'm sitting in his workshop asking him, what's new? How's it going? He's working on Argo, and I didn't know it. Nobody knew it. But that was a case of John had done work for the CIA before. I think more in the makeup disguise capacity. I know he created disguise kits for the CIA. In this case, he was brought in to help them create a fake movie, which is what they portray in Argo. And the Argo is such a great film in so many ways and every level. But it was enlisting John Chambers, the makeup artist, or special makeup effects artist, if you want to call him that, to help them with that. And he'd done jobs for them, so many good jobs for them in the 60s, I think. That he's the only civilian to receive a special award from the CIA.
Whoa.
So makeup effects has been used by governments and intelligence agencies, probably more than we can imagine. I mean, those are the only two cases I can think of
that we know of, yeah.
That we know of. That, but if somebody called me and asked me to do something like that, I wouldn't be surprised, But who knows what sort of? I wish they would. Here's my number.
Would you do it for $30,000?
Oh, that's the part where I kick back my chair the other night as I'm watching the movie. $30,000, and I go to inflation calculator to see what $30,000 is today. It's only $70,000. Would I do a fake assassination and risk, the mafia and the Department of Justice being, chasing me the rest of my life for 70 grand? No. Add a couple zeros and I'll think about it. But geez,
yeah, it's pretty
30,000. And then when they up the ante and they make the stakes higher for him, the guy still says 30,000. Well, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So stupid.
The captain whose voice sounds like gravel in a rock tumbler, basically.
Yeah.
It's played by Mason Adams. He was in the Lou Grant TV series and was the grandpa in the Pauly Shore movie Son-in-Law. He's the one that kind of really lays out what you've touched on here with the they're kind of putting the spurs to him to get him to do it.
I'll give you $30,000, Raleigh.
Just out of curiosity, when would this have to happen?
Within a week?
God, no way.
Why not? When you're used to working under pressure, aren't you?
Yeah,
You
but
do
it's
it
a
all the
different
time.
type of pressure. I'm a special effects man. I deal in make-believe. I'd like to keep it like that. It requires skill, precision, and timing. I couldn't teach you to do what I do in a week and expect you to pull it off.
All right, look, we're in a position to break the mafia's back. Put
Good, you're
20%
supposed
of
to.
them behind bars, and also I'm willing to pay you $30,000
The money doesn't give you the time I need.
tax-free. Okay, look, just think about it.
Yeah, and he says he mentions that his competitor, and that they'll just go to him, and then he, of course, he's going to agree. Then cue Huey Lewis. Ellen's making a quiche or something, and Brian shows up, and he's processing the offer. He picks up a vegetable, and he says,
Bok choy has great texture. Like alien flesh.
"Is this how your mind works?"
No, in fact, that's one line in the movie where all of us makeup effects people in the audience looked at each other and said, "Oh, Jesus." we don't think that way. I don't go to the grocery store and look at carrots and go, "Oh, this would make an interesting Pinocchio nose."
Right.
I'm buying carrots. I'm thinking of how I'm going to cut them and how I'm going to cook them. Now, I mean, back then I would observe people, especially interesting looking people, and just chalk it into my, into my memory and use it later. Like I remember creating Henrietta for Evil Dead 2, this big fat dead lady, and at the time I sent a guy in my studio around looking for, porn magazines of naked fat ladies, which we couldn't find. But I remembered, I was wondering, how do I sculpt the legs of this lady? I don't know what varicose veins and real globs of fat look like. And I was in an Italian restaurant one day, and this lady came in to pick up a pizza, and her legs, she must have weighed 400 pounds, and her legs looked like you'd stuffed a nylon stocking with big blobs of cottage cheese and painted a road map of Pennsylvania on the outside. It was real, and that became my model for Henrietta's legs. So
that's amazing.
No bok choy alien flesh, but I did observe people at the time a lot, and catalog things in my brain I like studying people anyway, but it was my profession, so I studied people in a different way. And if there's a really old person, I would really, study them a lot, because old age sculpture was one of the things I really like to do. But none of this bok choy stuff.
God, well, I had Evil Dead 2 down later, but since you touched on it, was Henrietta was Ted Raimi in the suit, right?
Yes.
And that was your first full suit effect, is that correct?
I think so.
The film alludes to a sex scene, and Brian makes a night call where he accepts the job.
I need your radio telephone. I'll be right over.
Which is great, because it would be a very short movie otherwise. One job I'm glad you accepted was Poltergeist 3. I absolutely love it. Did you work directly with Zelda Rubinstein?
I did, but I only did live casts on the movie. I did Zelda and Heather, along with my compadres Doug Drexler and Bob Kurtzman. We did Zelda's body mold and head mold and all that.
So for a situation like that, is the actor wearing like a swimsuit, or how do you do it part by
In that
part?
case, yeah, she wore. I think we brought her a leotard. There was a friend of mine ran a dance store called the Red Shoes. In fact, it's still around. It was in Pasadena and South Pass. It ended up being around the corner from my workshop. So anytime I had to do body molds of people, which was frequently, I'd pop in and, there's these ballet moms with their little girls there buying, their proper ballet suits. And I'm like, well, I need a dozen, large size, and for, slinging plaster on actors. But yeah, all of dance skin and leotards, and, they make custom ones with feet and all that.
Yeah, so then once she's in the leotard, is it all one thing where you're just spackling her with some kind of...
No, I mean, it depends on the size of the person, the position, and there's different materials you can use. Usually we used plaster bandages made by Johnson & Johnson, this exact same material they used to use for casts and arms, although today they use plastic. Sometimes they use plaster bandage, but the traditional arm cast material, the thing is, it worked great, and it was very expensive, and it was not reusable. So, buy a $70 box of bandages, and you'd use them, and you've got one leg. So if you messed it up, you've done a whole body. That's a fair amount of cash. And so there's ways to do it with hydrocal, a different type of plaster that you dip big pieces of burlap and essentially make your own kind of gigantic plaster bandages. But it's all tricky, and there's technical things to it. You can adjust the setting time by using warm water or adding salt to the water. You can get a 30-minute plaster to set in 5 minutes and make it very predictable.
Yeah.
It depends on the job. And I actually had a body cast done of me once to see what it felt like. And, it's pretty weird. It's being encased in this big fucking iron lung.
Yeah.
And it gets heavier as the water evaporates. You wouldn't think so, that because the water is leaving it would get heavier, but it does, and it becomes more solid and becomes warm. Yeah.
But it's good that you did it for the experience.
Yeah, I've had my head done several times. So I know exactly when an actor is underneath there for a head cast, especially what they're going through. And it's not often that you'll encounter somebody with real claustrophobia, but once in a while you will. And there's ways around that too. You can do the head in sections.
Oh yeah,
These days,
I heard you on a different podcast where you were talking about an actor that had a real issue with it, so you recognized that and kind of worked in pieces.
Yeah, I think that was Henry Silva and Dick Tracy. I wrote about it in Fangoria, where you've seen him in a million movies. When
Sure.
he came in, he went over to Doug, one of my bosses at the time, and he said, "Who's doing my head cast?" And Doug pointed to me and said, introduced us. And Henry pulled me aside very quietly by myself and said quietly, he grabbed both my hands, I remember. He looked pretty nervous, and he goes, "I've had this done 3 times before, and it was a miserable experience each time. Is there any way you can cast my face without covering my eyes, nose, or mouth?" I'm thinking to myself, oh, so basically cast your face without casting your face. But I could tell he was sincere and nervous, and I said, of course. And what I did was I put the material on him, which is kind of like a cold pancake batter. And I just got as close as to his eyes as I could, and around his nostrils and mouth. And I made sure to put him in front of a mirror and not block him, so he could watch me work.
Yeah, I think that's so smart and key.
Well, just so he could feel that he had a little control, and he could see that I knew what I was doing. If I'd covered him up, it would have been a whole new story, but I could tell this bothered him. And, there's other ways there. One time I had a really claustrophobic actor, and I did the person's face in sections. I did just the top third, What I did, first of all, I put watercolor marker grids on the person's face and blue lines. It's kind of like a tic-tac-toe design,
Hmm.
squares. And watercolor pencil is great because if you put a water-based material against it, it will transfer. So I put the grid on the person's face, did the forehead, pulled it off, did the
Oh, that's so
eyes,
smart.
and the eyes were covered, but the person could still talk. And for the last third, I did the nose and mouth, so the person couldn't talk, but they could breathe and they could see. So it went really easily. I took the three pieces of plaster at the end with the grid mark on them and put them on a belt sander and sanded them down right perfectly along the straight lines, glued them together, made another mold, and then came up with the final cast. So there's all sorts of ways around it. Of course, today, for somebody who's really terrified or maybe in another country and you can't get their head cast in time, you can just do a laser scan and have somebody do
Hmm.
a 3D print and or do a laser scan, pop it in the computer and send it to you and you do the 3D print. So there's all kinds of ways around it. But the traditional way still done today is a head cast in a material called alginate or with silicone, one of the. So now your audience knows all about special effects.
Yes. Now they can make FX3.
That's right. You can go into your kitchen and make FX3 and walk
Uh,
around in your underwear.
What is it?
Just don't look in there, okay?
Something they do is drive around in their FX truck. He picks up a cigar case and she says it's personal, but he opens it and powder sprays in his face. Are there a lot of pranks in special effects?
There are, but they're more elaborate than the cigar box trick with
Yeah.
Wally Tyler and Andy. Early on in the Mutilator, we showed up in North Carolina to prep for creating all these gory, bloody effects for the film. And we have, of course, had lots of blood and blood tubing as part of our, equipment. And my assistant Ed Farrell he and I and this other fellow went out to a restaurant, and Ed's roommate was the head waiter there, and it was really a high-end restaurant, the type where you serve, steak and lobster and seafood and whatnot. And people dress for dinner there, and so
Oh, like
couples.
the restaurant in the beginning of this film.
Yeah, but this is in the Carolina Beach, so you had mostly older couples in the suit and tie and the nice
Hmm.
dress, and Ed's roommate, I forgot his name, he would wheel around a cart with the various meat, and you'd point to it and ask for your cut and things like that. And there were white tablecloths everywhere. I remember that, and it was not too crowded that night. There was maybe 4 or 5 tables with customers, and we sat down. We had this prank all arranged. Ed's roommate would wheel up the cart, and we would point to our selections, and he would start cutting it off, and then he would accidentally cut himself and start squirting blood.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't remember the specifics of how we arranged it, but there was, he cut himself, kind of like the Dan Aykroyd thing. It's Saturday Night Live, where he's Julia Child. He cut himself and he screams, and everybody looks, and you can see the blood spurt on the white tablecloth. Then he starts screaming more, and there's more blood coming out. And then it becomes just a gusher, and he's screaming, "Oh my God, I'm bleeding to death!" And all the patrons just shot up off their table, out of their chairs. They're turning white, and there's
Oh,
just
geez.
panic. It went on not too long, maybe for 10 or 15 seconds, but it freaked everybody out because you've got just all this blood gushing into a white tablecloth where the guy is cutting the rib or whatever,
Yeah.
and it was just a freak out parade for a few seconds. It was really funny. And then he had to say, oh, this is just a joke, this is a prank, I'm sorry. And it is, he didn't get fired, luckily, but yeah, that was a nice little prank, but more
That's,
elaborate than a cigar box.
yeah,
That's
way
pretty
more
tame.
impressive.
My secretary. I told my secretary.
You're lying, Lipton.
Jeez, all right, I'm lying.
Lipton goes to see Brian. Brian shoots at him with blanks, which I don't know if it's the
Come
best
on.
thing to do.
No. Blanks, well, in America, blanks are the purview of the prop man. At least they used to be since The Crow. Technically, the prop man is in charge of firearms, which I think is pretty stupid. In England, Australia, everywhere else, you have what's called an armorer, and that's all he does. He's in charge of all the weaponry. He
Oh,
doesn't
wow.
do props. He doesn't do special effects. He's in charge of making the guns safe, the blanks, everything. That's how it should be done here. You should have a weapons expert. A prop guy does, the prop soap bar, the prop flower vase that goes on the table, or that might be set dressing. But the prop guy is essentially a prop is something an actor usually handles in a shot. A cell phone, an actor picking up a cell phone. The cell phone is a prop. Raleigh Tyler picking up the bok choy. The bok choy is a prop. A gun is a prop, technically, because the actor is holding it, but that's a prop that can kill people, even with blanks, as we know
Right.
from Brandon Lee. So I think it's really stupid that in America, we have the prop department also handling guns. It should be very, very specific to an armor for safety reasons.
In the film Videodrome, say, where James Woods puts his hand in his VCR stomach and pulls a gun out and it's fused with his hand, there's going to be how many different people are involved?
Well, that was all makeup effects because Rick did every portion of that.
Got it.
As you put in the video cassette, the video cassette is breathing. So that was a fake video cassette that Sean McEnroe and his guys made for Rick. The gun hand coming out, that's a prosthetic sculpted onto James Woods' hand. So there's no real gun involved. It's all a sculpted soft foam rubber thing. But I'm talking about any time there's just a specific gun by itself.
Sure.
And I've been on sets where, the last big film I did with weapons was in Java Heat in Indonesia. We had our armorer John from Australia, and that's all he did for the film. And they were AR-15s and major weaponry, and that's what he and his team, they handled all that. And whenever they're done doing a take and the camera cuts, he goes out and collects the guns, checks them, make sure they're safe, make sure they're clear, make sure that there's blanks and everything, that there can be no accidents. But right after The Crow, I remember I was working on a low-budget film with Eric Roberts, and the scene called for Eric to be holding a revolver. What?
Was it Love is a Gun?
Yeah, and Love is a Gun. Eric is holding a revolver to his head. He's trying to commit suicide, but he's kind of not doing it right. He's not quite all there to do it, and he has to pull the trigger. And before the shot, prop guy, non-union guy, comes walking on the set, and he's kind of talking and waving the gun around as he's talking and pointing it at people. That's the number one thing you do not ever do with a gun. And Eric just started yelling at him, and I cannot blame him at all. This is right after Brandon Lee and The Crow, and here comes this idiot prop guy who doesn't even know that you don't point a weapon at anybody, whether you know it's loaded or not. You just never do that.
Jeez.
So there you go. There's my take on firearms.
The mob guy enters the film, and it's Jerry Orbach, who is usually a police officer, but in this film, he's the mob guy.
Yeah, he plays a pretty good mob guy.
He's not bad. He's not bad at all. Tyler takes some photos, and they begin applying some kind of mud.
Okay. You want me to critique a scene? I'll critique that whole scene.
Yeah, please, if you don't mind.
Okay, first of all, I'm a photographer as well. So, anytime a makeup effects artist brings an actor into the studio for head casts and all that, the first thing we do is take reference photos. We need to do coloration. Where does the person have freckles? What do their eyebrows look like? Hair. Whenever I get an actor and I take detailed photos all around, but basically in straight lighting. I don't need fashion lighting or whatever. So, and I know how to work a camera, and because I've been a photographer as long as a makeup. But in FX, you got Raleigh Tyler with the mob guy, and you look in the background, he's got these professional, fashion photographers, photos set up, bounce lights, and all this crap that you would never use. And at the end of the scene, just still speaking about photography, at the end of the scene, which in real time on the screen is supposed to be a couple of hours maybe, the Department of Justice guy asks for the negatives, and Raleigh opens the door and he's got the negatives, which means, oh gosh, he went to a photo lab or did that himself, which takes hours. And when you develop color film as opposed to black and white, it's even more complicated.
That's amazing.
So if I'm to watch that scene in the film, I'm to assume that Raleigh Tyler knows how to do great fashion photography, and he can develop color film, while the other guys are outside having a cigarette, I guess, on the balcony. I don't know. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that's just the photography part. But when he gets into what you said, putting the mud on Jerry Auerbach's face, that's alginate. That's a dental material or prosthetic material. The same material people use for casting teeth, dentists use for casting teeth. It's a gel made from seaweed that sets in about, it can be 5 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on what you want. And they make a prosthetic grade for body casting. And that's what's used in the film. It's called prosthetic grade alginate. So that is the white, creamy stuff that Brian Brown is smearing on Jerry Auerbach's face.
Yeah, there's no nose straws, though.
No, they don't. They haven't used nose straws since the 30s. Everybody assumes they do. I've worked with actors. I've cast their heads, and they said, "Yeah, years ago, Mark put straws in my nose." Oh, where did you get that? I've never done that, and nobody I knew in the 80s ever did straws in the nose. What you do is you control the material. You put it around the nostrils, make sure the person is breathing, and you just put it right up close to the nostrils. You usually do either first or last, and once you're working around the nose, you have one person who constantly monitors just the nose area. So there's no straws. But getting back to the alginate casting of Jerry Auerbach, that's the same material you see that Rick Baker puts on Michael Jackson in the making of Thriller.
Okay.
The same Rick's alginate, as I recall, is a bit more creamy in the Thriller. It flows a little easier. The stuff in FX was a bit less runny, and maybe that was so it wouldn't be uncontrollable for the shot. But you can just tell, and any makeup effects artist can tell, just watching the way Brian Brown does it. I'm sure he's a great actor and a nice person. If you ever heard this, Brian, don't hold it against me, but you can tell he doesn't know what he's doing, the way he's moving his hands. There's no confidence in the way he moves his hands.
Right.
He has not done it 50 or 100 times before. He maybe did it once, or maybe not at all. And I'm sure, I have a feeling, I can't be sure, but I have a feeling Carl Fullerton was there that day to guide him through it. And maybe he showed him how to do it a couple times, but there's no confidence in the way that Brian Brown does it. Like if you take your car to a mechanic, the guy whips open, starts fiddling around the engine, you can tell just the way he's working that he's done that 50 times, 100 times before. And I don't get that feeling from Brian Brown is putting on like he's almost afraid to touch the material to Jerry's face. And, oh gosh, am I doing this right? There's this hesitancy that comes through clearly for me, at least. Anyway, sorry, Brian, if you meet me ever and punch me, I'll understand.
Well, a lot of these processes that you do, they take time, like you're saying.
They do.
You're applying them to actors. Are you ever like starstruck at all by them? Or
no. Before I answer that question, can I finish my critique of that whole scene?
Oh yeah, please.
Now that I've critiqued the photography aspects and Brian Brown's application of alginate, the other misnomer there is the time factor. So real time, what happens in real life, whether it's Rick Baker casting Michael Jackson's face in Thriller, to the point of, that's a good comparison. Rick does the alginate cast on Michael Jackson in Thriller, and then later on in the video you see the test makeup of the big cat creature. Okay,
yes.
There was several weeks went by between A and B, between the casting and the final creation. Weeks of sculpture, mold making, painting, everything. So in FX, in that scene where they haven't left the room, but you got the occasionally stubbing out a cigarette to indicate the passage of time, which, according to the number of cigarettes, might be, a couple of hours. In that time, Raleigh Tyler puts the alginate on Jerry Auerbach, and all of a sudden he's got foam rubber he's putting into a mold. Well, that's weeks down the road. You have to take the mold, make another mold, sculpt it, make another mold, weeks and weeks, and then you make your foam rubber and your other molds. Yeah, but it's the next shot. So it's one cigarette later. But in actuality, that takes, weeks and weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then for some reason, the dumbest thing is he tries the foam rubber pieces on Jerry, but they're not painted, they're not glued down. And he puts them on and then he peels them off upwards for this dramatic shot of it. To me, as a makeup effects artist, it's a dramatic shot of what the fuck is that? It makes no sense. It would be kind of like taking your car in to have the guy repair the engine, and he takes the wheels off and you drive away. None of it makes sense technically, as far as that field of endeavor. Just the whole scene. The first time I saw it, I shook my head. And just the other night when I watched it, I'm going, "Oh my God, how do I explain what's wrong with this scene?" You know. Glad I got that off my chest.
Oh, good. Yes, it is pretty much madness when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But, as people that were watching it just to see an action movie, they're just like, oh, yeah, he's doing things. Like they're
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's cool. The way he peels it off upwards, that's great. Wow, I wonder if this.
Now he has.
And, you got a whole row of makeup effects guys in a theater in Burbank just snickering.
Right. So as far as applying these processes to actors to do effects and masks and things, you've worked with everyone from Bruce Campbell, Ted Raimi, Don Opper, because you worked on Android, right?
Yeah.
Before he started in the Critters franchise, Donald Pleasance. Like, do people like Donald Pleasance? Are they sharing stories? Are they just sitting calmly for you to apply all these things? Is there?
They're just normal guys doing When I say guys, I mean men and women.
Sure,
actors are just there doing their thing. They're doing their job. And a lot of my students, when I taught makeup, they asked me, if I was starstruck or what's it like working for so and so. I'm like, they're just normal. They're just people. They're doing their job. Marlon Brando is just an actor coming to do his job. That's what they do. And I don't know, the whole thing of being starstruck by somebody, I've never quite understood that.
It's probably helpful because then you can just focus on your work.
Well, yeah, everybody in the film business is a pro, and they're there because they love what they do. Donald Pleasance was on the set of Prince of Darkness because he loves acting. John Carpenter loves directing. I love doing makeup effects. We're all there because we dig what we do, and our work overlaps because it's an extremely collaborative medium. So I don't think I've ever met a professional in any field that's been starstruck. I don't think you'd last too long in this business because people look and go, maybe you should, make pizzas for a living. I don't know. You don't work too well with actors because you're gushing all over them and asking for their autograph.
Right. No, that's a great point.
I've never seen it. I've never experienced it. I don't feel it. I've never seen it in my working on any movies that I've been on that I can recall.
Something else I've never seen is Mason talks to Brian on an overpass in broad daylight to ask him to pull the trigger.
I know I don't have the right to ask this.
Yeah, go on.
You know you're the only one who can do this job. You know that, Raleigh. We're talking about a very special effect here.
Yeah, that's good.
That should probably happen in closed doors or something.
Well, I'm sure it was more cinematic, but first of all, you're on an overpass, it's going to be noisy. And second of all, if you're talking strictly intelligence, the Department of Justice being out in the middle of somewhere where you can be photographed from every building.
It's so weird.
That wouldn't happen that way,
Yeah. Then we see Orbach is back. They're putting squibs on him, and he freaks out.
Oh, forget about it. You guys nuts? You didn't tell me about this. My pacemaker. If I get any voltage near my chest, I'm dead for real.
Not sure about that. I do know I cringed when Jerry Orbach asked, "What's that?" And Brian Brown goes, "Spirit gum," because we don't use spirit gum.
Oh, yeah.
That's like 1940s theater spirit gum to put on your mustache. We had very advanced glues by then. But and again, Brian Brown, he puts a little dot of spirit gum in here and there, and like, oh, please, how to do it.
It's not gonna
Sorry, Brian. Loved you in Gorillas in the Mist, but
there you go. The mob guy's at the dinner, and Brian walks in with a mustache on, and it's quite a disguise. He shoots him. He flees with Lipton. He gets double crossed. They crash the car. This is the scene I think you were talking about where you see the poster.
Yeah.
And a homeless person yells,
"Not again! No parking after 10 o'clock!"
which is an interesting addition. There's some double cross talk. Things move along. Brian returns to it.
You just reminded me of something.
Oh, yeah.
I actually did a disguise makeup on a guy once for something.
Like for a movie or real life?
No, it was a friend of mine, a makeup artist in Washington, D.C. He called me. I'd forgotten about it till just now. I should backtrack for this story to let you know my dad was a DEA special agent in charge of all of Southeast Asia
Okay.
in the 70s, and he put the big heroin smugglers, like the biggest kingfishers, in prisons for like sometimes up to 30 years. One case, he put 3 or 4 guys in prison, a total of 124 years. It's the biggest
Whoa.
case in Asia. So my dad did that in Hong Kong, India, Pakistan, the Philippines, all over Asia and the Middle East for like 30 years. That was his job. So I get a call in around early 90s, 1990 or something like that, from a makeup artist colleague in Washington, D.C., who'd done a lot of disguise work for who knows who. And he goes, there's a job I need to do, but it's in California and I can't do it. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. What is it? And he goes, it's Channel 4 London will call you. So Channel 4 from London calls me. He goes, we're doing a documentary on some Cuban drug smugglers from Florida or something. And there's a guy that ratted on all his friends, got sentenced and got a deal, and he's in the witness protection program. The same thing they talk about in FX, right? So I said to the lady, so what do you want me to do? He goes, this guy is afraid to appear on camera unless he's in disguise. Which, okay, I get that. So I said, where are you shooting this? We're going to come to California, and the guy's coming out from like Arizona or something. We'll shoot out in Riverside, California. I said, when are you doing this? 2 weeks. I said, well, this guy wants a disguise. I need to get a mold of his face. I don't know if these people had seen FX or not, but maybe they should have. Anyway, so they said, let me check. We'll call the Cuban drug guy. Basically, the Cuban drug guy was sentenced to 25 years. He ratted on his friends, made a deal, got out. But because all his friends in jail were going to have him killed, he went to the witness protection program. That was his deal. So the Channel 4 lady calls me back. Well, he's not comfortable doing a face cast. I said, well, we need to do something, And it went back and forth a bit like that for a couple of days. And finally, the word came back that the Cuban drug guy only wanted a wig, a mustache, and some sunglasses. And I said to the lady, I said, does he realize that people are probably still going to recognize him? And he goes, well, that's what he wants. And I hung up thinking, well, he's pretty fucking stupid. So long story short, I get together some wigs and mustaches, and I remember I bought some sunglasses that were kind of not dark. You could see through. You could see the eyes through. And I brought a selection of sunglasses, wigs, and mustaches. And I went out to Riverside, met this Cuban drug guy who was pretty sleazy. And I let him pick what he was going to wear. I was just going to put it on.
How old were you?
How old was I?
Yeah.
I was like 30. How was it? 1990, 34, 35. This guy's about.
Terrifying, so I was just curious.
What's that?
It sounds terrifying, so I was just curious.
Oh, no. It was meeting at a house out in Riverside, California with Channel 4 London with their camera team and their news interviewer, like 60 Minutes type deal.
Mm-hmm.
And the drug guy, and they're just going to interview him on camera. And I got there, set up my makeup. He comes in, and I said, why don't you just go ahead and you pick the wig, you pick the mustache, and you pick the sunglasses. So he picks a big, brown, straight-haired, shaggy wig, an average mustache, and these kind of pinkish sunglasses that you could totally see through the eyes. They weren't dark. You could totally, hey, look. I said, okay, this is what you want? He goes, yeah. So he sits down, put the wig on, put the mustache on. And I did use spirit gum, because one thing about spirit gum is if you put it on in 2 layers and you tack it with your finger and tap it, it makes it really sticky, where if you put a mustache on, you have to take it off with alcohol or take it off really slowly, because it will hurt. It will bleed. So I made sure, and this is a story point here, folks, I made sure I glued this fucking mustache down as tightly as I could. And then I gave him the sunglasses. So they do the interview, and he's telling about how he put his friends in prison. And, I'm thinking, anybody watching this is going to know it's you, and they're going to find you, and they're going to kill you, you stupid fuck.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm not saying this. I'm thinking this as they're interviewing him. And I'm thinking, you should have let me do a whole number on your face and completely disguise you. But he didn't. And after the interview, he comes back in the makeup bathroom where I'm doing it. I take his wig off. I take his sunglasses on. And I got really close to him and I put my fingertips on the edge of his mustache. And I looked him right in the eye. My face is about a foot from his. And I said, my dad was a DEA special agent for 30 years, and he put people like you in prison for a long time. And I ripped that mustache off. And I could see his face. It hurt like hell. And he just looked at me with this blank stare, and he blinked a few times and turned and walked out of the room. It was like perfect. And I called my dad that night. Hey, Dad, guess what I did? But, I thought he was a total shitbag, not just for ratting on people, but for smuggling drugs, and he deserved to be in prison. And that was my way of letting him know what I thought of him. So, yeah, I forgetful mind, but yeah, I did do a disguise makeup once, if you can call it that.
That's I'd say so.
Pink sunglasses and hair pieces.
The memoir title.
There you go.
Lipton kept messing with the gun.
So?
So, what if he put in real bullets? But then if they weren't dead, why didn't they just kill him themselves?
Shadowy car pulls up to their house. Tyler and Ellen sitting there. She breaks it all down for them that he was the bait. The next morning, she opens the curtains, and it's curtains for her. She's shot and killed, and Tyler picks her up, puts her on the bed. A guy breaks in. Tyler gets the jump on him with some books, and they battle it out for a little bit, and then Brian helps them iron out their differences by killing him with an iron.
Yeah, that would hurt. Jeez.
It's very strange. But then a phone call happens. We see a slavish apartment, and we see Brian Dennehy, which is great because on the cover it shows the two of them, and I was like, isn't Brian Dennehy in this movie at some point?
He comes in quite late, like 35, 40 minutes or something.
Yeah, and then the two aren't together the whole movie, and every time I think about this movie, I think of them in two. Like where they're like,
well, I think because partners. Of their strong connection at the end, running off with the money,
Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird movie. It's all about Brian Brown, and then it kind of veers off into being a cop investigation for a while. Like, what happened to Brian Brown? What happened to Raleigh Tyler? Oh yeah,
it's very strange. Brian investigates. We get some, Mr. Dennehy, some great police chatter. They use a computer to discover that the dead guy was a cop.
He was a cop.
Cop?
Ex-cop. William J. Adams, born 10/5/46. 2 years military, honorable discharge. 6 years NYPD. Packed the job in 4/6/81. The rest is NA.
Not available.
Brian reads a newspaper at a hot dog stand he's not eating at, which I thought was very strange. He then asks for his makeup.
That.
Yeah, he's just like, he walks up and he picks up the crumpled paper. Some people are like buying hot dogs, and then he just puts it back down and walks away. But Brian asks for his makeup now, and it's going to be brought to the boathouse. Dennehy has a cop rival, Murdoch, and this whole subplot for Dennehy, it didn't seem necessary. Like maybe they padded it out for him. I don't know if they were trying to make him seem more rogue or whatnot was going. But Andy, it's Andy, right? The lady that's helping Tyler.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Andy brings the makeup kit. She gets followed to the boathouse, tells the guy to put a boat in the water.
Raleigh Tyler has a rifle and it's pointed right at your head. If you want to meet with him, he'll know when you take this boat and put it in the water.
And then Tyler runs out and pushes him in. That's their whole plan to like escape, that's
a great plan.
It's so like Looney Tunes almost.
I know. It's like, what the hell?
They run into a tunnel. The wet cop follows. Now they're underground. It's dirty. It's dark. Not unlike the dream world in, say, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which is another movie you worked on.
Yep.
I just watched the new Scream Queen, My Nightmare documentary.
Oh, yeah. I saw that at the screening in July.
Yeah, it's great.
Really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And you are also fantastic in the Never Sleep Again Nightmare on Elm Street Legacy documentary.
The 6 or 8 hour documentary. Yeah.
Yeah. I often I put all the labels on the bottles for my wife's hot sauce business, and so I watched it all like in once when we were doing holiday prep. But I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic documentary. And you, is there an effect that you did in either two? You did 2 and 3, right?
Yeah.
Is there a particular effect that you were fond of or proud of throughout that series?
Yeah, it's the one that got cut out, which is the Nightmare on Elm Street 3 baby, the burned baby that was supposed to be in the beginning, opening scene of the movie. Oh, I've told the story too many times, but basically, a shriveled, emaciated corpse of a baby that I spent 10 weeks on, and Chuck Russell was too busy to come check it out, and he said, just do what you need to and come and we'll shoot it. And 2 days before Christmas, I brought it to set, and he thought it was great, but he thought people would hate him because he told me to think Auschwitz, and I went to the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and I used reference photos there for making the skeletal baby sculpture. And Chuck looked at me and said, "Oh, the Jewish people in the audience are going to hate me." And I said, "What are you kidding? It's just a shriveled baby. It's nothing to do with Auschwitz or anything." And he wouldn't shoot it. He didn't film it. He was just out of his mind at that point. And they never even filmed it to decide later. So it was the best thing I'd ever done for that film. And I think it's one of the creations I'm most proud of, and it was never filmed.
Do you have photos of it?
Oh yeah, of course.
I would love to see that.
And
you worked on the tongue, right? The tongue scene and
no, I didn't. I wanted to. I was thinking about it, but I didn't. I just finished From Beyond, and I was frankly exhausted.
Yeah.
I didn't want to bite off too much. Chuck Russell, the director, wanted me to do the Freddy snake. He really pushed me to do that because he'd seen the From Beyond creature, and I just said, well, let's have somebody else do that. I need a break. I need something small. And not so.
You did the arm, is that right?
The what?
An arm effect in that?
No, just a cut wrist for.
The wrist. Yeah.
Trish Arquette.
That's right. I love all the pictures that you post on your Instagram. There's a nice collection of them. There's that great shot of Patricia on there.
Yeah, I got a picture of that, and we had fun. That was a very easy effect, but it had impactful, and she was fun to work with. It was her first movie, and she's a big thing on Twitter these days, and she was great. A lot of fun.
That's awesome. Dennehy and a cop go to Tyler's studio. They hear the monster making the noises, so they bust in and illegally search it. And during this, Dennehy says,
"What kind of a guy dreams this shit up, Mickey?"
And it's you.
Jeez.
You dreamed this
right.
shit up.
What kind of a line is that? It's like there were some weird lines in there that people wouldn't say, like that one, for example.
Yeah.
Every time Jerry Orbach is with Brian Dennehy, he keeps calling him a wise guy and stuff like that.
He's
asking what's that, That just didn't work. And what kind of a person dreams this shit up?
Yeah.
Well, the writers, actually, if you want to know.
That's true.
So, and the makeup artists, but both.
Yeah.
We
got Brian underground. Can't cope with what's going on. He opens his kit, and they emerge disguised as transients.
How funny, huh? I don't mean to be nitpicky, but I am a nitpicky person as far as realism. And the makeups look great. They look like transients. And when they turn and walk away, and the shot widens, they're walking along like they're normal. I just got the impression that the homeless people and the transients I've seen around LA, and there's a lot, too many, unfortunately. They wouldn't be walking normally like you're walking to your office.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not sure how they would be walking, but it just. Sorry, Brian. If Brian Brown ever sees me,
he's walking like a proud wizard. It's very strange.
Yeah, he's skipping along. He's all healthy and happy. And if you were transient, just crawling out of the sewers, he might be shuffling a bit. I don't know.
Right. That's a good point.
I don't know. Just one of those things.
Yeah. So Dennehy then goes to the police captain Mason, and there's a back and forth, but I couldn't pay attention to it because there's the weirdest glass basket of jelly beans on his desk. It's really weird. I was just obsessed with it because I was like, what an odd thing to put on his it's a glass basket. So I'm just going to say that makes this movie an Easter film. So
well, if you can back up to the opening scene, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but there's a shot when the the terrariums are exploding with the fish tanks on the lobsters. And there's a lady on the ground underneath the table, and she's like pushing and patting at a fish that's flying, like she's trying to push it back into the shot. It's weird. I don't. Maybe it's just me, but I thought it looks like the extra is trying to help the fish get into the shot, and it's like leaving the frame.
I think it's lobster that she's like pushing at the camera.
It's like, oh, wow, that's deliberate, isn't it? But anyway, back to Brian Brown and the job.
Oh yes. Well, then Tyler calls, and they find out that the call was coming from inside the building.
Oh my God.
The classic movie trope. Lipton goes in his car to go get Tyler, but Tyler's already in the car, and that's pretty interesting. Tyler gets Lipton out, puts him in the trunk. Lipton tells him to go F himself, and then they start interrogating him by bashing the trunk of the car into other cars.
That's actually a pretty good little trick. I'd do that totally if I wanted to get somebody's information in the trunk. I'd slam into a few pillars.
Yeah, it works, and
that
then
would hurt.
For the first time, I think Dennehy and Brian are headed to the same location. Dennehy calls Mason's house, and DeMarco answers, which is the weirdest. Like, have the mob guy answer the phone while he's supposedly dead.
Tyler, you son of a bitch, you're dead! Dead!
Yeah, that's weird, yeah.
It's very weird. So this is where the movie gets super interesting. They cut through a fence, Tyler and Andy, and they steal back the effects truck. They throw out some smoke pods, which are just straight up explosives. I
don't know. Yeah, the smoke pods are not explosives. I don't know.
Yeah, and then you alluded to this earlier. They're saying all of these movie titles, and he says, "Do you remember Skidball Express?" And she throws out an oil slick. And then the cop drives through a milk plant, and my favorite one, he says, "Do you remember the Mannequin Depression?" And that's where they throw the body of the...
You know, I'm just trying to imagine myself working on a movie in my studio in the 80s and running to the back room where my assistants are making molds and goes, "Hey guys, do you remember The Boys Next Door?" "Yeah, we'll do it like that." "Okay, boss." And I'd leave the room. It would make no sense. You don't reference movies you worked on. You talk about, you might say, "Hey Andy, get an oil slick ready," not, "Hey, do you remember Skidball Express?" Come on, man.
It's actually such a weird, long way to get to the point. Like, rather
exactly,
than
it's like
throw the body out the back. He's like, "Hey, do you remember the Mannequin Depression?"
All right, what if you'd worked on this movie? "Hey, do you remember who is Harry Kellerman and why is he saying all those terrible things about me?" That's an actual movie title.
Oh wow, that's a wordy one.
Yeah, that'd be a whole new scene in itself just to get that line out.
So they throw the body out.
Although, if I can interject, what if Andy doesn't remember? "Hey, Andy, do you remember who is Harry Kellerman and why is he saying those terrible things about me?" And she goes, "No, what effect did we do?" And then the car crashes because they ran out of gas.
She's like, "No, but who's in it?" And then he's like,
"Yeah, I've never seen that." "Well, I worked on it, but I was sick that day. I didn't do that." "Well, we need the oil slick, you know." God damn it. We're in a car chase here, woman. Get on it.
They're just driving around the same building trying to...
Yeah, she can't remember for so long they have to keep circling the block until she remembers the movie title. "Oh, that one. They changed the title. That's why I couldn't remember." Meanwhile, they're surrounded by police and Department of Justice, and they're dead.
That's right. It had a different production time.
Yeah, 3 hours later. Well, did it have another alternate title?
No, in India, it was called this.
Oh, I didn't see. I saw the German release, and it was different. Yeah, I've worked on movies that had 3 or 4 different titles. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, which one are you referencing, Raleigh? Or better yet, what if she remembers the movie and she gets the wrong effect instead of pouring out an oil slick? She's remembering, you know, she pours out boxes of potatoes or something.
Yeah, I mean, he's got...
No, not that scene.
Truck. Every prop from every movie, apparently.
Yeah, she just dumps everything in the truck out at the same time because she can't remember what movie he's talking about.
So after that, he ditches the lady. Bye, Andy. You're never seen again in the film. And Dennehy's in trouble with the cops. They take his badge, so he steals his commander's badge, which,
Very clever.
yeah. Tyler shows up at Mason's, and he's got a bag full of stuff. And one of it is like a painter's tool that he uses to rustle branches. And then when the guard investigates, his Uzi touches the bars, and he's electrocuted and killed.
Hey, I always had that in my makeup kit, sure.
Yeah. And then a man investigates and sees a yellow balloon, which blows up in his face and kills him. So now Tyler's just straight up killing people.
Who thought of that? And what type of... I guess you could have a high explosive attached to a balloon, but come on. That was a thing where, the writers had to do more homework. Sorry, but it's true.
Dennehy shows up, and those two people are dead. And so you're like, okay. Tyler starts cutting cords. DeMarco deduces that Tyler's in the house, and Tyler sets up a bunch of traps to kill some guys, and then just bludgeons a man with a crowbar. DeMarco has an Uzi, which is like, he's in protection. Why does he have...
Well, before that, one of his distraction tricks is setting up this huge Mylar screen at the end of the hallway. Now, it wasn't clear to me, did he bring that with him, or did he find that there?
I think that's in the bag. That's one of his...
Okay, well, I don't remember the bag being that big, but I've never carried even a tiny piece of Mylar in my makeup effects kit.
No pop-up mirrors? It's not part of it.
No, and I don't know any special effects guy who automatically has a sheet of Mylar in his truck. He might, but maybe. But that's and it's almost too much work for what you're trying to do, Yeah. It's a visual thing to be clever for the movie. I mean, it's very elaborate, and then you cut to a string across the hallway. Well, that's pretty boring and lame.
Right.
Okay. Why didn't you just, wait for them and shoot them when they came out? Why did you need to rig a fucking, PowerPoint presentation with the screen? It's kind of stupid.
And then they'll see each other and shoot each other. It works.
Yep.
Tyler's gunned down by the Uzi, and DeMarco touches a window that's electrified, and it triggers his pacemaker, and he dies, proving that Tyler's not only good at effects, he's an active listener, because Jerry Orbach mentioned his pacemaker in the beginning.
That's good, and he's an electronics expert to know exactly what voltage he needs or amperage or whatever. And of course, the super glue, gluing the gun.
Yes.
That would probably work if you took a big bottle of super glue and glued it all over the gun, but you'd have to make sure the person picks it up before the glue dries.
Yes.
But that would glue your skin to it. That would be a big time, that would work, definitely.
Yeah, so Mason offers him a key for $50 million of stolen mob money. And he super glues his hands together and pushes him out the door. He's, of course, shot to death.
Sorry, I got ahead of you. I thought the super glue scene had just happened. But
no, it's perfectly. It's right at that moment. They find Tyler, and he's pronounced dead. Then he leaves all sad, which is weird because he did steal that captain's badge. Tyler sits up in the morgue, removes the apparatus, which I wasn't sure what they were showing us there. Is it just because of the thick skin they think he has no pulse, or...
That was my impression, but that's because I know prosthetics. That my impression was he glued a neck prosthetic and wrist prosthetic so that whoever touched the skin would not feel a pulse because you're just feeling a piece of flat rubber.
Got it.
You'd also be able to tell the rubber's cold. It's not warm. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you didn't know a prosthetic would do that, you might look at the movie and go, why is he feeling that stuff up his neck and his wrists?
Yeah, it's strange. He jumps out a window, but who catches him? It's Dennehy. Next thing you know, they're in Italy, and DeMarco's alive.
Switzerland, I think, isn't it?
What?
Lake Geneva. Aren't they in Lake Geneva?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
DeMarco retrieves the money, so we're like, whoa, we just saw him die. But then off comes the face, and it's Tyler, and we have our heroes together. They have their $50 million.
Well, I'm going to miss the job, but this should ease the pain somewhat. Well, Raleigh, boy, you'll never have to put that shit on your face again.
I don't know, Leo. It's hard for me to do anything else.
And then the credit sequence that almost has a blooper reel.
Yeah, of all the oh, let's remember this person before they died, how happy they were.
It's so weird. And then, of course, imagine
it's like Diane cooking fettuccine. Oh, look, she's all happy and smiling. Oh, there's there's the Department of Justice traitor guy, he
Yeah.
looks happy there, weird.
And that brings us to the final questions. Unless you have any final thoughts for the movie FX.
FX, no, I just ripped it to shreds as much as I could. But I actually like the film, believe it or not. I enjoy
think
the
it
film.
shows. I think it
Yeah.
shows. You can't help but having the knowledge that you have watching a movie with your profession being treated in the way that Hollywood often bends the reality of things. I think you were very fair.
Yeah, well, I cringe and I make jokes at it, but I enjoy it. It's fun. And frankly, it's about the only movie out there that does cover makeup effects, sort of.
Probably not for the duration. What they were really going for a full film rather than just have like one sequence.
Yeah, they've done films with sequences with makeup effects artists. In Argo, Ben Affleck comes into John Goodwin's trailer. John is playing John Chambers, the makeup artist that I know that gave me my start in the business. And first of all, John wouldn't have a trailer. He would have an office in a building and a whole makeup department back then. And, he wouldn't be sitting around with all his creations in such a tight space. I don't know. It's kind of weird. I could go on, but I'll stop there.
Okay. So final questions. What is a good day like for a special effects makeup artist?
What is a good day like? Gosh, I've never been asked that question before. Good day on the set or a good day in the studio creating the stuff?
Oh, either one. People won't know anything about your profession. So what's a good day like in the studio?
Well, I used to have, my studio had hours of like 9 to 6, but I usually had things so well organized that my team would come in early and be working on what they had to work on. I'd come in at like 11 or 12 because I'm not a morning person. And they'd kind of update me and I'd supervise and sculpt, and we'd have lunch, late lunch, come back. And at the end of the day, I'm talking in the 80s, the ideal, perfect day on a film, everybody would leave around 6. Maybe one person would stay late. We'd have dinner together, come back, bring out some Kahlua or some beer and keep sculpting, put on a movie. Very relaxed, That would be the ideal day working in the studio. And then after that person left, I might go home for a few hours and come back and sculpt at 10 p.m. till 2 in the morning, working with the music, the Pretenders just blasting really loud, or Van Halen or something, 5150 usually. And, do that till 2 in the morning, go home, watch a movie, go to sleep, come back at noon the next day. Perfect day on the set? Gosh. A perfect day on the set is where things are running on time and you do a prosthetic makeup and they give you the time to do it and they don't knock on the door and ask how long. And when it's done, they bring the actor in, they shoot his close-up first, his or her close-up first, while the makeup is fresh. And it becomes, a 10-hour day. And then you take the makeup off and everybody's happy and we go home. It doesn't always work that way. The studio I could control, more. The preparation, creating the stuff in my studio. But set work, gosh, sometimes you go in and, they call you in at 7 in the morning and they tell you, well, the actor you're supposed to do, we're not bringing him in till 10 because we're late already. I'm like, well, thanks for calling me. So I'm sitting around here for 3 hours having coffee, basically. Yeah. Right. And then the actor comes in at 10. And they said, well, don't start until after lunch, maybe 1 or 2 p.m. because we're even further behind. So the makeup I was to do at 7 a.m. I'm not even starting till 2 p.m. And then, maybe they have me do it. And maybe I do it and it takes 3 hours. And then the crew breaks for lunch. So now we're at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Oh, we're going to bring him in, but he's not going to be in the first shot. That's the typical stuff that happens on a movie, or especially TV. And then, okay, we're going to do one shot with him, but it's going to be wide. Okay, so I've been here since 7 in the morning. It's now, 10 p.m. You're doing one shot of the makeup, and we're not even going to see it. And then you're going to have me come back at whatever time in 9 hours and redo it. And they're like, yeah, Okay. And you kind of roll your eyes, you don't complain, but like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
So that would be an imperfect day. It goes both ways, it depends on the production. Star Trek, it was a very fast pace, and the ADs, I love them all. They're such sweet people. You'd think after 3 years they'd know how long the main characters' makeups take, since they've been making the call sheets on them for 3 years.
Right.
They keep knocking on the door after a half an hour going, how long is it going to be? Well, what is it always? 60 minutes, and we're at half an hour. Let's see, 60 minus 30. And they kind of, oh, just check in, and they leave, come back in 10 minutes. How long? It's kind of weird.
And what are your favorite things about being a special makeup effects artist?
Gosh, I like the collaborative nature. I like working with actors an awful lot. And I like the creating of new characters and new designs. And, just really the whole moment when it comes to putting it on the actor, and the actor is becoming a different person. They enjoy it, and it helps them create the new character. And it's really satisfying for you, or for me as an artist, to see that sculpture that I worked on and molded and painted all of a sudden as part of that person's flesh, and they're becoming a different character and acting in it. It's fun. It's fun to do. The weird part is there was many guest actors I did on Star Trek for many years who would come in at 5 in the morning, and I'd put the prosthetic rubber piece on them first of all, initially, and they're tired. They're in the bathrobe with coffee. They're bleary-eyed. I'm tired. It's 5 in the morning. First thing I do is glue rubber all over their face, which is pretty much an off-white color, but already they're disguised from, like, in the first 10 minutes, they're disguised. So I never really see what the actor looks like. And I spend a week, or 10 days working on the actor's makeup, and I've seen them for about a total of, 3 minutes without makeup. And I've spent, many, many 12-hour, 15-hour days with them in the prosthetic makeup. So I recognize their character and their voice. And there were 3 occasions after I left Star Trek. One was at a coffee house in South Pass. One was at a vet in North Hollywood. Or Studio City. I'm at the vet, and there's a lady next to me with 2 dogs. And she turns to me and goes, Mark. And I look at them thinking, who is this? She goes, how are you? It's been so long. I go, oh, do I know you? Yeah, it's so-and-so from, I played, blah, blah, blah from Star Trek. You worked on my makeup for a week and a half. Oh, well, you got to understand, I never saw your face, man. I saw your face for like 3 minutes the whole week. You saw me. I'm the guy with the brush coming up to touch you up. And so you know me, but I didn't know you. And it happened I'm sitting outside in a coffee house in South Pasadena, and this guy sits next to me. Mark, how's it going? It was the same thing. It was this other actor. I'm like, I don't know you. And I had to explain why. And I get it. Well, And I could walk by them today, and I probably wouldn't recognize them because I knew them as their character, and it was a very elaborate alien design that they're wearing. And that's how I remembered them. It was kind of funny. It happened a couple times.
What do you say when people ask for advice on how to, like, if they're interested in special makeup effects?
Well, it's ironic. I write a weekly column for Fangoria magazine online. It alternates every Sunday, I believe it is. And I don't know if this one has come out yet or not. And I'm not sure if you can access older ones, but I suppose everything's accessible on the Internet Archive. It's one I wrote about getting into makeup. My advice, first of all, really be passionate about it. That's the thing that's going to make you successful. It's not whether you have natural talent or not. You have to have a passion for the business. Like when I look at my early work as a kid and Dick Smith's early photographs in college or Rick Baker's early work, it's very crude and very amateurish, but there's promise and there's passion. And that's how you get better, is you're passionate about it so much that you work on it all the time. Like it could be in anything, whether you like making carpentry or pottery or painting or photography. You can be everybody's a beginner at everything at some point. And how good you get is how much you practice, and you practice more if you have more passion about it, if you really care about doing that. These days, there's a million ways to learn makeup. When I was a kid, and most of the pros that I know, we had books and magazines. You get a library book of makeup. You get a magazine on filmmaking, cinematography, or monsters. Today, of course, you have the internet where you can find anything. But the trouble is, you go to YouTube and you type in, I think for this article I wrote, I typed in makeup effects and I got, 9 million hits for a zombie tutorial or something like that. And while we're talking here, I'm just going to open up the file and see if I actually published that or not yet, or if they published it. The thing about YouTube is great. You can find anything. You can ask Google a question and find out pretty much damn near anything you need. But you're also going to find a lot of stuff put out by people who don't know what the heck they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And here, let me just look at my files here. Makeup effects. I might have done it, I think, first. Oh, yeah. Self-teaching. So it was my number 6 column. So that would have been October, probably November, December. And the title of the column in Fangoria Online was called Self-Teaching. So I suppose if you do Internet Archive search, you can find it. But I kind of talked about the same things, that if you want to learn how to do a zombie makeup, don't go to YouTube and type how to do a zombie makeup, because you're going to find some guy in his bedroom showing you how to do it all wrong.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to search through 5 million videos to find one that's good. Just, look at photos from The Walking Dead and Google, making of The Walking Dead. You'll find some great stuff, and, they do brilliant work on that show. That's what I'm talking about. You can find anything you need. You just have to filter it, and that's the time-consuming part. The real key is to practice it and just find out the basic stuff you need to know. Find work from artists who really inspire you. Put up those pictures that Dick Smith did, and Stuart Freeborn and Rick Baker, and put up their makeup creations, print them out, put them on the wall. And Jack Pierce, the Frankenstein and the Wolfman, and just practice, because you're going to be able to tell immediately if someone has potential by their work, and you're going to be able to tell from their personality how much dedication and passion they have just by meeting them, and you'll know that in 2 minutes. Today you have schools everywhere. I've taught it to the best, and one for maybe 6 months and the other for 5.5 years. And, you're learning. If you want to go to school, you might be stuck in a class with 20 people, which means as the teacher makes his or her rounds, you're going to get maybe 5 minutes of that teacher's attention out of every hour. And you're paying big bucks. How much are you going to learn that way? It's up to you, I guess.
Right.
I don't know any makeup effects person of the highest caliber who's ever gone to a school. Everybody's self-taught. Rick Baker, Michael Westmore, myself, Greg Canham, Stuart Freeborn, Christopher Tucker. Everybody's self-taught. If you want to do a school, that's your choice. You're going to be shelling out a lot of money, and you have to weigh all the advantages and disadvantages. That was a very long answer, wasn't it? What the hell was your question anyway?
Very thorough. It was perfect. No, it's just advice about someone interested. And sometimes people are passionate about things and don't know first step to take. And I think you covered all of it perfectly.
Well, it's a fascinating craft. I don't do it too much these days. I'm focusing mostly on writing and trying to get films made. I haven't picked up a makeup brush or sculpting tool in several years now, but I could pick it up, and for me, it's like riding a bicycle. I still love it. I've got a deep love for the craft and for the monsters and the makeups since I was a little kid, for 50 years, more than that, 55 years. If you're passionate about it, you'll find a way to succeed. And you can't approach it as a way to make money or to be famous. You have to approach it because you love doing it. That's what's going to make you give you a career. It's going to make a career and a job for you. And it's not going to be a job because it's fun, because it's something you love to do. Yeah, I could go on and on about that, but that's probably enough.
No, that is absolutely perfect. And this is the last question before we wrap up. It's one of my favorite questions. Mark, what are your dreams like?
I had one last night. What was it? It was really good. It had something to do with coronavirus. That should tell you something. Gosh, I don't dream that much. I mean, we all dream. I don't remember my dreams that much.
Yeah.
No, I've never had a dream that inspired me to do creation. Although I remember when I was reading the book Ghost Story that they later made into a film, I did have some scary dreams about a female vampire that's kind of floating slowly through the air, and there's a guy sitting in a chair, and she floated up to him and just slammed her fingers into the sides of his head several times, and he started bleeding out of his skull. And I woke up, and then for some reason I remember that particular dream like almost 40 years later. I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. You didn't wake up. How are we going to do that with prosthetics?
No, it was just a creepy image, and it was obviously spurred on by reading the book, because the book was really well written and creepy and very suggestive. You know, you wouldn't. Peter Straub didn't put in all the specifics of something that was being alluded to, and I think that was his writing style of suggesting things made my dreams suggest something. But no, that's my dreams. God, I wish I could remember more of them, actually.
That's great. Well, they're not stress related, so that's perfect.
No, I'm not stress related. No, coronavirus, not stress related at all.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching.
You're welcome.
And thank you for everything you've done in so many movies that I love so much.
Glad to help out. Thanks for the hot sauce.
Yes, of course.
Tomorrow.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care, man.